Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into one of the wildest historical arcs you'll ever come across. We're going to trace the path of a simple trading business that completely snowballed into a massive empire and then ended with a truly bizarre modern twist. It's a massive story of economics, power, and, honestly, some incredible historical irony.
Okay, let's dive right into this. How exactly did a trading company become a colonial power? That's the core mystery we're unraveling today. Right, because we aren't talking about a nation-state rolling in with a royal army to conquer another nation. No, we're talking about a group of commercial merchants, guys sitting in an office managing ledgers who somehow ended up ruling millions of people. It's literally like a modern tech giant suddenly declaring sovereignty. Crazy, right?
To wrap our heads around this, here's our roadmap. 1. The birth of a corporation. 2. From trade to territory. 3. The corporate government. 4. Rebellion and ruin. And finally, 5. A strange modern revival.
Let's start right off with part 1, the birth of a corporation.
Back in the year 1600, this whole saga starts simply as a quest for profit. Queen Elizabeth I hands a royal charter to a group of London merchants to trade in the East Indies. They basically just want a piece of that highly lucrative Asian spice and silk trade, which, at the time, was already dominated by the Dutch and the Portuguese. By 1608, their ship, the Hector, arrives in Surat on India's western coast. But, well, they face a pretty huge obstacle: heavily armed European rivals. So what do? They fight. In 1612, the English actually defeat the Portuguese at the Battle of Plassey. Think about that. In barely a decade, they went from mere traders to deploying direct military force just to protect their market share.
Which brings us to part 2, from trade to territory. Now, what's really interesting here is how, as the 17th century progressed and the political landscape in India shifted, we see this completely logical yet incredibly dangerous escalation. Step 1, the merchants establish coastal warehouses to store their goods. Makes sense. Step 2, to protect those valuable goods from rivals, they build fortified bases, like Fort St. George in Madras and Fort William in Calcutta. And step 3, to protect those forts, they maintain their own armed forces. They are literally militarizing their commerce.
Meanwhile, the company directors were carefully watching regional powers fracture, especially after the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb died in 1707. Now, keep in mind, the Mughal Empire was the massive, overarching power across the Indian subcontinent at the time. So their central government weakening wasn't just a political shift. To the company, it was a monumental corporate opportunity. They realized they could totally exploit these growing regional divisions to their advantage, and that set the stage for 2 pivotal battles.
In 1757, at the Battle of Plassey, company forces under Robert Clive defeated the Nawab of Bengal. But here's the kicker. They didn't win just by having superior numbers. They won through secret negotiations and strategic financial alliances, like heavily bribing Mir Jafar to keep his troops entirely inactive. Plassey essentially proved that financial persuasion could be just as devastatingly effective as combat. Then fast forward to 1764, at the Battle of Buxar. The company decisively defeated the combined forces of the Mughal Emperor, the Nawab of Oudh, and the former Nawab of Bengal. Buxar absolutely solidified their military dominance over the region's traditional rulers.
Moving on to part 3, the corporate government.
This right here marks the chilling moment the East India Company crosses the line from a heavily armed business into a formal ruling entity. In 1765, following those military victories, they secure the Diwani rights via the Treaty of Allahabad. I want you to pause for a second and really think about what that meant. A private corporation now had the legal authority to extract taxes from millions of human beings across Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. They were no longer simply trading goods. They were flat out acting as a sovereign government.
And this brilliantly illustrates that the company's massive expansion wasn't just some simplistic divide-and-rule policy. It was a highly complex, multifaceted strategy. Yes, they used direct military victories. Yes, they leveraged economic power and played on European rivalries. But they also used really aggressive diplomacy, like the subsidiary alliance system. This was where Indian rulers were pressured into accepting British troops and political influence, which, effectively stripped away their independence without firing a single shot.
Then there were these purely bureaucratic maneuvers, like the Doctrine of Lapse. Initiated under Governor-General Lord Dalhousie, this policy essentially let the company just annex a state if its ruler died without a recognized natural male heir. Naturally, you can imagine, this policy fueled enormous resentment and fierce resistance from displaced leaders, most notably Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, a queen who would become a massive central figure in the resistance that was brewing.
The sheer scale of this operation is honestly hard to comprehend today. By the mid-19th century, a private corporation had become one of the most powerful political institutions in India. Their corporate armies contained hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers, all of them serving under the ultimate command of a British corporate board of directors sitting back in London. Just let that sink in.
And of course, the economic consequences for the Indian subcontinent were profound. The company strictly reorganized the local economy entirely around British imperial interests. Traditional Indian industries, particularly textile production, faced absolute structural collapse as British manufactured goods just flooded the market. And while exact methodologies obviously vary among historians, modern estimates suggest tens of trillions of dollars in wealth were ultimately redirected from India to Britain over the colonial period. It's an unbelievable transfer of wealth.
So, let's jump to Part 4, Rebellion and Ruin. Let's see how this all builds, because the situation absolutely reached an inevitable breaking point. In 1857, a massive uprising breaks out. Indian soldiers, local rulers, civilians, and resistance leaders rise up across northern and central India against company rule. Now, the British ultimately suppress the revolt, but the shockwaves fundamentally alter history. By 1858, the British Parliament passes the Government of India Act, basically concluding that a private corporation absolutely cannot safely rule a subcontinent. Governing power is directly transferred to the British Crown. And finally, in 1874, the historic East India Company is officially dissolved by an Act of Parliament. Done. Over.
Or was it? Part 5. A strange modern revival.
The empire was gone and the company was dead, or so it seemed, right? Well, in the 21st century, this story takes a wildly unexpected twist. Step 1. In 2005, an Indian entrepreneur named Sanjeev Mehta begins acquiring the remaining brand rights of the East India Company. Step 2. In 2010, the modern East India Company actually reopens, but this time it's a flagship Mayfair luxury store in London selling premium tea, coffee, and chocolates. It's this incredible historical irony. The very colonial brand that once subjugated India was now wholly owned by an Indian businessman, bringing the entire narrative full circle. But, this second life wasn't exactly destined for longevity either. £950,000. That was the reported debt of the revived luxury business when it ran into severe financial trouble. By late 2025 and early 2026, the modern retail company entered liquidation. Related companies faced strike-off proceedings, which basically means they were legally deregistered and dissolved, and its flagship London store shut its doors for good. It's kind of fascinating to compare the two distinct deaths of the East India Company. Look at this. Back in 1874, the Imperial East India Company was dissolved by massive government intervention following a bloody continent-wide revolt. Then, in 2026, the modern luxury brand was dissolved simply due to a mundane corporate strike-off and financial collapse. Two completely different eras, two completely different endings, all for the exact same name. So, the crucial point we really need to take away is this. What are the enormous consequences when a business actually becomes more powerful than the government around it? The East India Company shows us, pretty clearly, that history isn't just shaped by kings and politicians. It's shaped by profit, trade, and unchecked corporate power. As we look at today's global megacorporations, it's definitely a question worth pondering. Thanks for jumping into this explainer with me today, and keep exploring.